Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek program here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake. I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are on the perennial border. We are under a tent because it may or may not be raining right now, but we needed to bring the midweek program to you anyway. So we've got this lovely little setup here to keep us dry while Tim is working in the garden getting wet for you, which is fine. He's a horticulturist. He can handle it. No worries. But today we're on the perennial border because we're talking about Gardening 101. We're talking June gardening tasks. So Tim has pulled together a bunch of things that he's working on in the garden with his team of interns and the horticulture crew, and we're going to share what we're working on here so that you at home can garden along with us, know what we're doing, so you can join us with the confidence of a professional gardener. So, with the announcements out of the way, I think we can pass things over to Tim to show us what he's up to in the garden for the month of June.
Yeah, it's the month of June, and we've been blessed this year with a rather mild spring and early summer now, since I guess June 1st is technically the meteorological summer, not the astrological summer, but we are now into summer, and we have still had a 90-degree day temperature here, and I laugh, my family back home in Pennsylvania has had 90 degrees, and they often don't reach 90 degrees once in a year. So, and we've had decent rain until relatively recently, and they've had very little rain, period. So we've been blessed here with wonderful weather. And right now it's not raining on me, despite what Blake was mentioning. I am staying dry, and the rain we were getting earlier, I think I would normally be sweating more than, I'd be wet from sweat more than I was getting damp from the actual precipitation. So enough said with that. I'm going to get started with a few things you might think about doing in your own landscapes at this time of the year. So one thing that I've been thinking about, especially here in the perennial border, is controlling the size of some of the late blooming plants for us here in the garden, so that they don't quite get too tall or overshadow their neighbors. You can do a little bit of pruning and trimming. It will, on things like our chrysanthemum down here and the salvia right here are the two instances I'm really looking at right now. And I'm going to actually do some pruning here on the salvia, and then we'll go to the chrysanthemum. And there's another thing we'll be able to get from this as well. So this salvia right here, for instance, this is Salvia puberula Alderton. And this one, we have a beautiful clump back here in the back, and we also have this one here in the foreground. This one I'd like to keep a little bit shorter. I love the height of it in the back, but I want this one to actually, if it tops out at this height when it comes into flower, way off in October, so there's a ton of growing season left for this. I want to cut this back really hard. I'm going to go you might be shocked. I'm going to go probably about taking off almost half of the height of this. And I'm just cutting back to the nodes. Here on these. Salvias are really distinct. You can easily see where to make a good cut on them, and they will branch from those spots. So this is going to force the buds that are down here to all break, and it's also going to set this back a little bit. It may also cause this to flower a couple weeks later than this back here, which will extend my season of flowering, hopefully. Which is another reason to be doing this. So I'm just going to quickly get through here on this salvia and do this. So, but what I'm not going to throw these away. I'm going to hand these off to my interns here in a few minutes. But these are also, it's perfect time to propagate some of these plants that we're cutting back today. So these are some things that you might see on our plant cart or in our giveaway here in the fall. But this is a really cool salvia. It has hot pink, strange flowers with bracts. I mean, it's a very different salvia, and it's a very late flowering salvia for us here. So Salvia puberula Alderton. So as you can see, how much I've opened this up here. And it's just taken a couple minutes to do this. So I've opened this up. We'll be able to see the hibiscus here that we were highlighting in the preview here, view. Helen will be a little bit more visible. There's some things back behind it. I have a relatively tall growing echinacea back here that I've put in here, are seedlings from our burgundy giant echinaceas that we have down near the McSwain Center. And they get about this tall, so we'll be able to see that a bit better now. And this will again be a lot shorter, but it won't hurt. It's gonna come right back for this fall. And we will have a beautiful display here in October and to frost, more or less. So look forward to seeing that. And if you come to the garden, look and see how things have filled in here. It's not going to take long. It looks a little stark at times if you look real close, but in a week you won't know that I was even in here. So that's on the salvia. I can do the same thing. Lots of people have chrysanthemums in their garden, and this is another one that I like. And actually, we've gone through this one once already, so I might not do too much to this. But this is chrysanthemum Country Girl. This is a pink daisy. It's just a really good bloomer. It's compact, but we can always make it a little more compact. It won't hurt it. We've pinched these once about 3 weeks ago already. And I'm going to do another pinching on them, and that's going to force more terminal shoots on them, which is where you're going to get the flowers on these. On the older, really good, I have to say, garden-worthy chrysanthemums, they do have a tendency to be a little bit more leggy and don't break as much. The modern selections that you'll get in that big pot of mums that you have in the fall, and you pay just $10 for a thing that's this big, those are actually from one cutting, and they have been selected for, they don't even need to be pinched. But I don't like the structure of those, and they often don't perennialize as well as some of these older cultivars like Country Girl, which was over here and here. But I want to keep the height adjusted here. So I'm just going to take off a few inches of these. And this is just a really good one here. I won't do everything on this one, but in a few weeks you won't even know that I have been in here at all. And I might not get through all this one today. This has a lot more stems than the salvia that I was just doing. But this will also, you can do this kind of pruning to control your the openness of, say, pathways. And as is the case right here, this is right next to one of our pathways here through the border. And so I want to make it a little bit accessible. But I'll still soften the edges, so I'm not being too hard, but on this. But this will ultimately give us a really nice compact plant, and even more blossoms than we would have had I not done this. So I did most of that right there. It's a little rough again looking, but I could shape it up a little bit more, but I really don't have to if I don't want to. It gives it just a soft, irregular look, which is kind of nice on this border, because this is not a formal garden that we have right here. So those were two of the things right here in this garden that it's a really good time to do pruning on. But other things, if you have any Joe Pye weed in your garden, some of the Vernonia species, the ironweeds that get bigger, you can control them as well the same way. If I had done it in May, early May, I might have done the same type of procedure to some of the tall growing phlox, which ours down here are just coming into bud, and I wanted them tall, so I didn't touch them. But if you have a landscape where you need that, you can do that earlier on, and you'll do the same thing. Right behind me is also another plant that I can do a little bit too. This is a hibiscus here, actually. This is Hibiscus grandiflorus right here, right next to me. It has really nice silver backs to the foliage on this one. I'm not going to be severe on this, but what I want to do, there really aren't that many stems to it, but I want to cause all these axillary buds to break on it and make a much fuller looking plant. So I'm just gonna tip this. I'm not even gonna take an inch off of the stem itself. The leaves are a little bit more than an inch, but I'm just taking the tips out of that, and that's gonna force all the axillary buds to break, and I'm gonna get more flowers out of it this way. It's gonna delay the flowering probably a week or two from what it might have been otherwise, but again, it will be more rewarding in the long run. And I've done this already with some other hibiscus that I have in another part of the border, but I'm going to do this one today. And it actually has really helped. I had some that were a real lanky looking thing and just had a few stalks to it, and they're now dense and bushy. And I've only, like I said, I've only just done it within the last couple weeks. So there's another quick little project. But so something that maybe many of you have in your landscape, I don't have in this border though, are azaleas. Many of your azaleas, if you want to prune them, this is actually a really good time to do it. Before the 1st of July is an excellent time to do them, because after that you're risking the new growth not having time to form new buds for next year. You can still prune them after that, but again, it becomes riskier. You may not have as heavy a bloom next year. But if you want to do any major pruning to your azaleas, right now for the next month is about the extremes of getting, like I said, a good flowering for next year. And you can do the same thing, much like you would, I did with this salvia in reality. You're, controlling the size, and you can do that the same way. And it'll force, again, those axillary buds that you don't even see on the azaleas. There's nodes in there that will just break, and you'll get a whole bunch of new flush on there. And it will proliferate, and you'll have more shoots that will flower in the coming years. So. That's my pruning little part here, but also hiding in among here are there's some deadheading. This is a perfect time in a perennial border in particular. Deadheading is something that you can do. And earlier on, I don't know if it's overly visible in here, but there are still the remnants of, I have a bunch of penstemon in here. This is penstemon tenuis, which is a southeastern native. I think I showed it at least I don't know if it was a tour or if it was in a talk earlier in the spring, but this is actually a blue-purple. This is a really nice one for us here. There aren't many blue and purple penstemons that do well for us here in the east. You go to the western United States and every other one is blue. Actually, maybe 2 out of 3 are blue. But this is one of the better colored ones that we have for us here. It self-sows readily in this border, and I actually want to control it a little bit. The plants typically aren't that long-lived, but if you cut them back, it's going to force the basal shoots to actually reflush instead of wasting time continuing to make seed. And I do get plenty of them, so I'm not worried about losing this by doing this, but by not letting it go to seed. But I am taking it way down here, almost to the ground, and cutting it some nodes down low. And this is going to make way for the foliage to come up and get good light to it still, as well as it's gonna, the plant's not gonna waste its time making that seed, and it's gonna be a little bit more vigorous on its own. So there's a bunch of this behind me, and I'm just gonna do a real quick trimming here. It's a filler plant in this border, and it does a really good job, and it's beautiful in April and early May for us here. So, but there's lots of other things that you can start deadheading if you need to at this time of the year. You may have a butterfly bush, which ours here in the garden have been flowering for weeks now, and they are also, you can get in there, you can clean them up. The newer ones, especially some that Denny Werner, our former director, did, and some of the other ones now, they've gotten that are much more sterile. So you don't have to prune them and deadhead them to prevent them from making seed, but they aesthetically may look a little bit more pleasing if you do take off those spent inflorescence. So let's see. That was some of the things I was going to look at here, but going back over here, I'm going to actually quickly hand off this to get this out of my way to one of my interns here. So, thank you, Evan. I'm giving him some cuttings that they can stick maybe tomorrow. Is this area here. Right now I only have a couple stalks left, but through the winter months there was foliage here of an ornamental garlic we have in the garden. And well, it's rather nude here at this time of the year. There's only a few that decided to flower this year, but that's okay. But down here, there's nothing going on here. I have a hole in the landscape, and I'd like to fill it with something that might give us an interest other than through the winter months when we have the foliage from the garlic, and then the early summer when we have the actual flower stalks on the garlic. Something I think that I have that might cohabitate in this location actually, and these look really nasty, but I'm going to put, this is actually a tuber or a corm from an alocasia architecture. This is one that Tony Avent selected and Mark has had in his garden. And he brought in some a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to put some in the garden somewhere. I think this is a spot to try it. This is a very large growing, very super hardy form of alocasia. They I don't think they really know which species it might be, but it's been a really good one for Tony in his garden, and Mark's as well. And I'm just going to stick a hunk of this in. It doesn't look like much now. You might find something similar at this time in the stores. You can probably still find some colocasia, the elephant ears, and even sometimes alocasias available at this time of the year. They're typically a little earlier, but there might be on sale now, which is a really big benefit. And you can buy them and you can plant them. They love the warm weather, which we really haven't had yet. My alocasias that I have in the garden already are just pushing up in the last 2 weeks. So this isn't going to be that far behind. And when we get to the warm weather, which I think has started to be forecast this weekend into next week, it'll get this jump started and give me something in here that maybe, I'm hoping for something 3 or 4 feet tall by the end of the summer. But I want something in here that's going to give me structure, not just at this time of the, that is, not throughout the winter, but something in the summer where I have this hole here. And it'll cohabitate, if it gets big anyways, with this Lesbidesia here and all these Salvia and Echinacea. It'll just give me a bold, really big leaves right here. So I'm going to actually stick one of these in the ground. And let's see, could my interns just hand me my spade fork over here? Sophia drove away with my shovel that I had. So thank you. But this is probably better to dig in here because I know there's bulbs in here from the allium. So when I dig into them, it'll be less critical. Even if I displace them, I won't be chopping them into minced garlic. So my soil again in this border is just terrible. If anybody has seen me working in here, I know you don't want this in your yard. It's just this black stuff. I don't know. It breaks up so terribly. So I'm just going to dig a good sized hole here, and yeah, there's I think a piece of garlic right there. And I'm going to stick this alocasia tuber in here, and I expect in the next 2 weeks or so, I'm going to start having some foliage pushing up right here. So that's another plant I'm going to do here. And so my ground is still rather bare here, and you all know, may have seen Bernadette Clark, who does our color trials, talk occasionally. And like I said, the color trials, we have, we benefit here at the Arboretum by getting some of the extra plants from that. And I like to try some of them in the border. They're not, we're in the perennial border, and some of these aren't promoted as perennial, but maybe perennial. So this is what you would call a verbena. They're now calling it a glandularia. This is it's Superbena Cherry Burst, and 2024 is the number associated with it, which is a really cool one here. It kind of has a magenta and salmon flower most of the time, though occasionally you'll just get salmon colored flowers too. I really like this. And the verbenas, or glandularias, they have a reasonable chance of surviving for us here in the winters. They are truly perennials. They're short-lived. They tend to root along in open, disturbed areas. So, and they'll be perennial, but not always. But I'm willing to give it a try here. But what it's going to do is cover up the ankles of things in this area, I'm hoping. It will do its thing a little bit through the summer. It'll say it's too hot for a while, and then it'll perk back up in the fall. So I'm going to stick a handful of these in here. I have 3 of them that I got right here. So I'm going to space them out. These are Superbena, so as their name implies, they're pretty vigorous. And we're gonna just put them along the edge, and they're just gonna soften this a whole lot in through here. If I put them a foot or 2 apart, it won't hurt. And I don't need total coverage here. I just want something here that's green and maybe give me some color throughout the season. And you can probably get some verbenas fairly inexpensive at this time of the year. Not all of them are made equally, but some of the better cultivars will, like I said, survive for us here. And it's worth a try. And right now, a lot of your spring planted annuals will be available. Often on sale at that. So it's a good time to shop for some bargains. Garlic all through here. So, and the benefit here is if this survives, the verbena survives, the garlic will come right back, come up through this during the winter months because it's a cool season active plant. And the alocasia is very tropical for the most part, and it dies to the ground during the winter. It doesn't make any really visible growth until late May or June. So again, it's as the garlic is doing the last of its things, flowering, these will hopefully be coming into their own and giving something visually pleasing in your landscape. I have one more over here. And this will get the ankles of my salvia also covered here. Now that I've gotten some of that done, another thing that you might think about, and I mentioned you might find some deals, but you might find some caladium bulbs available at this time of the year. Probably coming into clearance pretty soon, I would think, but even if they're not, you can get them. It's still a wonderful time to plant them. I have bags of them I haven't planted yet. I haven't gotten a chance to. But these are some that I remember telling you guys about how to do it last fall, and I have literally hundreds of them that spend their winter on top of the shelf above my desk in my office. And these are just starting to sprout. If I get these in the ground somewhere, I'm not going to put these here in the perennial border, but I have some white ones that I'm going to put in our white garden next week, or actually no, tomorrow with my white garden volunteers. This is not one of those, but you can see they're perfectly happy. You get these planted right now, they're gonna start throwing up their leaves really quickly, and they can take sun or shade. As long as there's adequate moisture and heat, they will grow. They go winter dormant, so you just dig them up, stash them relatively warm actually, unlike most bulbs, and that's why I said I had these in my office. And they really wouldn't have cared if I planted them already, I mean, but they probably would have just sat there in this relatively cool weather we've been having. But now that they're calling for 90s, these will just take off like gangbusters. So if you can get some caladiums, or if you have some that you thought, oh, it's not worth me getting them out, try them. I bet you'll probably get some a really nice display out of them. So that was just one I wanted to mention, and that's actually a cousin to the little alocasia that I planted back here behind me. So, or this elephant here that I have right here, or this elephant here. So those are actually all very closely related. So those are just a couple of the things that I thought might be of interest for you to try this month. So do we have any questions?
We sure do. And before we get into those, I'd just like to say that this has been a lot of fun for me, getting to smell the foliage that you're chopping off. The chrysanthemum.
The mom's has a really, yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's real nice.
The salvia is pretty pungent, as is the chrysanthemums too.
I like chrysanthemum smell when you cut them. Yeah. Anyway, so Carolyn's asking, what is the best system for preventing a lawn's grass growing and trying to overrun my flower and shrub bed?
I don't know about lawns too much, but you could have an edging if you want. I don't like a big broad edge, but bless you, one of my interns in the background there. But an edger, that is an edging material, whether it be concrete, brick, or even metal edging or plastic edging, and then a weed eater. You're probably having I'm guessing some of our warm season grasses, like Bermuda, which likes to run horizontally, and it will go over top of them. But if you come back and you edge it, then it's good. Or just a spade and a shovel. I don't mind. I mind digging as long as you keep up with it. You can cut a nice edge with a straight edge spade, and keep a decent edge that way. I hate to say it. You can use chemicals too, just to burn it back on the Bermuda. I wouldn't do it necessarily on your fescue, your clumping grasses. But my guess is you're talking fescue, Bermuda or zoysia, one of the warm season grasses, if it's running in from the horizontally. So I don't know if that's of any help or not, but
yeah.
I mean, I just do it, either a mechanical barrier or a manual or mechanical removal is ideal. And if the Bermuda does get in there, you have to dig deep. I have a spot, actually, it's in my border here, and I dug most of it out, but there's always a little piece.
Sure.
So even though you go down 6 or 8 inches.
Well, turf lawns are nothing if not high maintenance.
Yes, and so here I don't know if you want to turn the camera around, you can see we don't have a perfect turf lawn. We have clover, I have crabgrass, actually, I have nutsedge, I do have some Bermuda and some zoysia mixed in there too. It's not homogeneous, and so it's actually much more environmentally friendly in reality. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you have those weeds, but it's a green surface to rest your eyes on, which is the main reason for having a lawn. So,
for sure. Okay, well, Barbara's asking, are you able to prune salvia hot lips like you did the salvia puberula?
You could actually do that with salvia hot lips. What I normally do with salvia hot lips, though, is in the spring, or actually late winter, about end of February, 1st of March, I cut it to the ground. But it's already this tall again. But you can do a partial cutback on that if you want to control the height on it. Another thing that you may want to try a different cultivar. One of my favorite cultivars is just to the side of me here. It's another salvia microphylla, as is hot lips. It does not have the white and pink combo though, but this is one called San Carlos Festival, and it's about as tall as it ever gets right there. It doesn't get much taller than about 15 to 18 inches at most. Your hot lips will get up to 2.5 to feet tall sometimes. And this is always really dense, and it flowers earlier than hot lips for me. So that's another thing to look into, is maybe if you don't want to do the pruning, do a cultivar swap out.
Okay. George is asking, when can bee balm be pruned?
I mean, right now, mine is a little tall. I would have done it, if I was going to do bee balm, I probably should have done it for us here in this area in late April or early May at the latest, because we are now in flower. And if I had waited a little bit longer than that, I would have been cutting off all the flower stalks. And right now, you can probably see the snow is on ours, because we have Monarda didyma hybrids here, which are really prone to powdery mildew.
And just for clarification, you would prune them in April to control the height?
The height, if you wanted to control the height. There are also, I don't like them, the newer hybrids, they have, or selections, they are much more compact. These are some of the old standbys, which I actually personally like, at least in this border, which we have a 15 or 20 foot depth of border to it, which is bigger than most average person has in their yard. So I need that height, so I don't necessarily want to do that here, but you could do that. Or, like I said, get a shorter cultivar again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. With regards to azalea pruning, can you prune them, both the natives and the Asiatic ones?
I would be less hard on our native ones, but most of the Asiatic ones, which are what we have, the majority of us have in our landscapes around here, it's probably, this is a really good time. I'd be a little bit more restrained on the pruning on the native ones, just because they tend to be a little less vigorous. And also, if you have encore azaleas, that's another challenge, because they can flower just about any time. So you're going to probably cut some flowers off, but whenever you do it. But the typical Asian ones would be what I would recommend doing that system for.
Okay. Marianne's asking, Lychnis coronaria, a biennial, do I cut off old flowers or do I pull the whole plant?
It just depends. It can sometimes be a short-lived perennial too. So, you know, it might survive for 3 or 4 years too if you cut it back and prevent it from totally going to seed. Ours still, we have it in the rose garden, and I have a population actually not too far within the line of sight for me right now. They are starting to finish up their flowering. If I would cut them back right now, I bet those plants would persist. for another year or so. But you often want to leave at least a few go to seed so that you get a cycle going, so you have some seedlings and you can pull out the older plants that might be there a little bit longer than the typical, you would say, 2 years life cycle of them. They may, those ones that you do hold from year to year though, may not have the vigor though that the younger ones have. So it might be worth just pulling them out too. So it's however you want to try it.
Sure.
Just make sure you do have a few seedlings there to replace is all I can say. You can try to save some of them, or you can pull out the old ones, just leave some of the new ones.
Nice.
But ours have really good basal shoots on them this year. I think I could probably just go and cut them back and I'll still have plants that will survive with no problem.
Okay, cool. So Diane's asking how to manage Sweet William.
Sweet William. Okay, again, that's much the same as the Lychnus coronarius, which are kind of kissing cousins. Sweet Williams are Dianthus barbatus, which, if you're talking about what I think you are, which is also a biennial typically, but if you do a cutback, you may be able to get the plants to persist, or you can let a few of them go to seed. There are some selections that have been made over the years that have been a little bit more perennial as well. There was one that Tony Avent promoted called Heart Attack, which was a really dark red one, and that one would perennialize, but sometimes you don't know. And then there's some hybrids now that are available between Barbatus and Chinenses, and they tend to persist a lot longer. I would grow these back home in Pennsylvania, and I've seen them a little bit down here, and they'll tend to survive for 3 or 4 years before they start to wane in their vigor. So, but you could cut your back and see if they will survive from the axillary shoots that arise from you forcing them to not produce seed.
Okay. Judy's asking, what spacing should you use for Carex blanda and other wood sedges?
Carex blanda? I don't know.
Okay.
You might check on Hoffman Nursery's website. They have a catalog, and they may give you some of that information. I'm not sure. I don't know, because there's so many Carex. I don't know those specifically.
Okay.
And there are Carex that are tiny.
Yeah.
And then there's Carex that are monsters.
Sure.
And
most of them clump.
Most of them are clumping, but I'm not gonna make a guess.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one.
Well, that's fair. Okay, well, that is all the questions we have for today. So
that's good. It's starting to precipitate a little bit more now too.
It is starting to precipitate. Wonderful. So thank you so much, Tim, for pulling this presentation together for us and showing us all what we can be doing in the garden right now. Thank you, Evan, for fetching stuff for Tim. That was crucial. And thank you, everybody at home, for tuning in with us today. I hope you will join us next week. Oh, goodness. What are we doing next week?
Let's see.
Oh, next week we're doing the
auction.
The auction highlights. So you'll definitely want to join us for that to see some of those rare and unusual plants I was telling you about. We'll see you all next time. Y'all take care.